Hi everyone, my name is Matt Washburn. I am the Education USA Program Officer for Europe and Eurasia, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on best practices for international student recruitment in Europe and Eurasia, a part of a monthly series of webinars that we hold. It's the third, and we've recently done one focusing on the Middle East and North Africa, another on student visas, and in a month's time, we'll be doing another one on Latin America and recruiting students from Latin America. Welcome. Please take advantage of the chat box in the platform to ask questions. Please indicate, what institution you represent and what your question is, and we'll do our best at the end of the presentation to try to answer those questions. Great. Education USA, who we are. Well, Education USA promotes U.S. higher education by connecting international students to American institutions. We support U.S. higher education community internationalization through international student recruitment and retention plans, and we promote all 4,700 plus accredited U.S. institutions equally. Education USA also engages with foreign institutions and governments regarding their student mobility initiatives to the US. And we essentially have three audiences that we work with: the US higher education community, international students based in 180 countries around the world, and foreign institutions that would like to work with Education USA and work with U.S. institutions to increase student mobility to and from their country. And our guiding principle is that we help students and institutions find their own best fit. We want students to make sure they are applying to the right institutions where they're going to have a happy, productive educational experience and finish their studies with a positive impression of their time here, of their life in America, and that helps us accomplish our broader Bureau's missions, goals, and objectives. Next slide, please. We are truly a vast network. You can see here in this slide a picture of a representation of every single center around the world, color-coded by the REAC that's responsible for them. As you'll see in a bit, we have 14 REACs throughout the world, Regional Educational Advising Coordinators. And we are in 432 centers around the world. And our network is comprised of advising centers, staff, and services, all that help promote U.S. higher education to audiences throughout the world. So as you can see in this slide, there are 434 centers actually where Education USA operates, and Europe and Eurasia is fortunate to have 118 of those spread throughout the 46 countries where we work. And that means that our higher ed community and institutions has ample opportunity to connect with many centers and many advisors that are doing outreach, both in person and virtually, with thousands of students throughout the region. You can see here that there are a number of different types of host organizations that host us. It's, in fact, U.S. embassies and consulates make up a pretty small proportion of the total. We are very much engaged in working with Fulbright commissions in Europe, with American councils, working with other NGOs and local universities throughout the region that help partner with us and help us to reach as many students as possible that would be a good fit for your institution. Next slide. Here we have a more specific breakdown for EUR of the 46 countries with 123 centers, 156 advisors, and our 3 REACs. American spaces, more and more American spaces are becoming host institutions for Education USA. the Fulbright Commission, Fulbright commissions throughout primarily Western Europe host many of our centers. Well, we're also at a high school and at a number of colleges and universities, as well as American Council's offices throughout Eurasia and Turkey as well. And together that comprises our very diverse network of EducationUSA centers. Next slide, please. At this point, it's my pleasure to turn the presentation over to my three esteemed REACs. REACs, in case you don't know, are Regional Educational Advising Coordinators. We have Peter Baker, based in Brussels, Belgium, and you'll see the countries there that he represents, or that he cares for. Gordana Mircik, who's based in Budapest, Hungary, and her portfolio of countries in Central and South Eastern Europe. And then we have Catherine Skadova, based in Kyiv, Ukraine, covering many of the countries in Central Europe, Southeastern Europe, and Eurasia as well. So with that, I will turn things over to them and just say a word here about our Regional Educational Advising Coordinators. They truly are the linchpin to everything that we do in terms of reaching out to students, reaching and serving as a link between higher ed institutions and those students. And their expertise in the field of higher education is invaluable and makes everything work. So thank you very much, Peter, Gordana, and Catherine. I'll pass it over to you.
Next slide, please. So before we jump into the specifics of best practices and what you can do to engage with us in Europe and Eurasia, we wanted just to highlight a few key points that we'll be talking about today during this webinar and giving you some more specifics. Right now, more than half the U.S. Number of students studying abroad from the United States is studying in our region, so that's a really great opportunity for you to think about engaging them. We're also seeing increases in institutional partnerships and short-term programs. Most of our higher education institutions in the region and ministries of education are really looking to see what they can do to diversify their student bodies on their own campuses. We have a lot of other ways you can connect with our students through cohort advising, both in person and virtual. Our region does have some governmental scholarships and some private funding that is available to our students, and chances are you haven't heard of many of them, so we're happy to share details about those today. And then we have a lot of great ways for your alumni to engage with us in the region, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide, please. So in terms of the numbers of students studying in Europe and Eurasia, studying in the United States from Europe and Eurasia, our numbers have been relatively flat for the last several years. Right now, there are just over 92,000 students studying in the US from our 46 countries. So again, we have a lot of students from the region. Roughly, this is just under a third of the total number of students in the States. Next slide, please. Can you go to the next slide, please? The next one. So in terms of our numbers from the last Open Doors report, we saw that a very, very slight decrease of students from our region studying in the US. So overall, just 0.2% decrease in the number of students from Europe and Eurasia on US campuses. And as you can see from this chart, the types of students studying, the varying degrees of decrease is going to be different from each section. So for the undergraduate students, we saw a 0.9% decrease overall, and a much higher at 2.2 decrease from our graduate students. We did see an increase in students interested in OPT programs for the region, and we'll talk a little bit more about how you can talk about those with potential students as you recruit in our region. So even though, next slide, please. So even though as a region we've had a very slight decrease from the previous open doors number and relatively flat numbers overall, we do have variations between the different countries we have in the region where we have advising centers. And if you look at these numbers carefully, you can find this information on the EAIE's website for open doors, and you can download this and see it specifically. But you can see that some countries have had pretty large increases and some have had pretty large decreases. Next slide, please. In terms of the region, though, roughly 20 countries that we cover for Europe and Eurasia did see some increases of students studying in the United States at varying levels. But the countries we wanted to highlight here for you are the ones on this screen. So Albania, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Montenegro. While overall their numbers are relatively low compared to other countries, they are seeing steady increases in the number of students from those countries in the United States. Now, these 5 I have on the screen, they all had 10% or more increases in the number of students in the US. So again, when you're thinking about recruiting in the region, you can think about the big sending countries for sure, but also we wanted you to know that there are these pockets of positive change throughout the region, and we're happy to help you understand better how to access those students. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Europe and Eurasia is the #1 destination for American students to study in the region. Again, most of the students studying in the region are going to the usual suspects, the UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. But we do want you to know that there are many of our higher education institutions in the region that are looking to do more and more to recruit American students to come and study on their campuses, either for degree programs or short-term programs. And later on in the presentation, Peter will talk a little bit more about some ways we are recruiting on the ground or helping to promote these opportunities on the ground to our local higher education institution partners. And also talk to you about why these numbers of American students coming to the region are so important for outgoing numbers of students to your campuses in the US. Next slide, please. Overall, some major trends that we're seeing and just things for you to keep in mind when you're preparing your own promotional materials and outreach to the region. We are seeing an increase in the number of English language degree programs that are offered in Europe and Eurasia. And this goes beyond the English language speaking countries that we have in the region. Russia, Poland, Czech Republic, and many others are developing programs, full degree programs in English, and are marketing them very heavily to students within the region. If you go to any higher education fair in our region, you will see large pavilions for Russia, for Ukraine, for Poland, for Czech Republic, for Spain. They're doing a lot right now to increase the exchanges among the students within our region. So that's something for you to think about when you're recruiting our region. You can go to Spain, but have a chance to meet students from across the region, essentially. More and more of our students, too, are taking advantage of various exchange programs. And again, Peter will talk about the various options available through the Erasmus program, but more and more of our students are academically mobile for short-term programs. They are going abroad for study programs, for a semester, for a year, for internships, for research. And so many of the students that you might work with and speak with from Europe and Eurasia have already had an international experience within the region and are looking for other options as well. We don't have a whole lot of statistics today that we're going to share specifically about community colleges, but we did want you to know that this is a very interesting option for students in the region. We are seeing more and more interest from the community college side to recruit and engage in the region. Students are very attracted to this model. It's because it's a cost-effective model for many of them. And the 2+2 option is also very attractive. They can get the 2-year associate's degree and then continue on to a 4-year bachelor's degree. And then one final thing I will point out is that English language is quite high for Europe and Eurasia. There are some countries that have higher rates than others, but again, many of our education programs in these countries are really heavily focusing on English language acquisition. And so students in the region aren't as interested for programs that are only focused on English language in particular. They are looking for programs that are going to be a bit broader and could focus on an area of study, but using English obviously to learn more about that field of study. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to one of my colleagues who will take it on with some more specific trends for the region.
Thank you, Katya. And if can I have the next slide, please? Hi, everyone. This is Peter Baker, based in Brussels. I'm going to take a few slides to talk with you about some other opportunities for when you're engaging with our region in some broad categories. I'd like to stress at the beginning here that this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more content regarding these subcategories that I'll get to here in just one second. But we'll be talking a little bit about institutional partnerships, government and foundation scholarships, and a little bit about cohort advising programs. So if I can get the next slide, please. I'd like to start here with institutional partnerships, just to go back to something that we've been talking about before, general mobility between the US and our region. As you can see, there has been significant increase in US study abroad over the last couple of decades, and that's certainly been the case to Europe and Eurasia. As you probably know, more than half of all US students who study abroad do so in our region for obvious reasons, long historical relationships between institutions in Europe and the US here. And I bring that up at the beginning because that's a very solid foundation from which to develop new institutional partnerships and to revise and update existing institutional partnerships. And as we'll discuss in a few minutes, sometimes those institutional partnerships on both the European side and the US side are the entry point from which you can get access funding opportunities for mobility, collaborative research programs, and other things. Next slide, please. So when thinking about these opportunities, these are just a few examples to bring to your attention. One is the Fulbright Scholar Program, the Fulbright International Education Administrators Seminars specifically. This is a program that is global, so these seminars are offered around the world, in different countries around the world. And I've brought to your attention a couple of the programs that will be offered in our region in the coming years. You can see one coming up in Russia. The application deadline will be in October. And then one that says France, Germany, the application deadline, February 3rd, 2020. Those go together because there are two cohorts, one cohort that's in France, one in Germany, and then they come together for some co-program at the end of that. This program is for individuals such as yourselves who are attending the webinar today, for you to learn about the higher education systems of different countries where these seminars occur, for you to develop relationships with ministry officials and from representatives from institutions in the respective countries. So that this is a great entry point from which you can perhaps develop new institutional partnerships. There's the link, and I know this will be published and broadcast, this presentation, but there's a link where you can explore the application process, and plenty of time for these two programs that will be going on in our region. The next opportunity, if you go back one slide, please. At the bottom of this slide is USA Study Abroad. This is the sister branch to EducationUSA. So this is to bring US students to study abroad. Again, this is an opportunity for a study capacity building grant from the USA Study Abroad division that you can work on collaboratively, perhaps with one of your institutional partners here in Europe. These programs can be funded for up to $25,000 for a collaborative application between two countries. And as the name implies, this is to build capacity, to build programs to increase the amount of US students who are studying abroad. And you can put in this application collaboratively with an institutional partner here in Europe. I don't want to put additional pressure and stress on your already busy schedules, but the application deadline that's currently open is until March 29th for just a few more days, but be monitoring this website as new opportunities become available regularly. So keep coming back to that, and new applications will be posted on an ongoing basis. Next slide, please. The next one is the Franco-American Academic Exchanges web platform. This is very new. This just went live in the last several weeks, and this is a very innovative tool that was launched by the US Embassy in Paris to allow you to post your desire for institutional partnerships with French institutions, French researchers, French faculty to do collaborative programming. It's very easy to navigate, and after you post your desire of what you're looking for in terms of an institutional partner or a faculty partner, Then on the French side, your French counterparts at the institutions, French faculty, will search your postings and try to find a match. And then if they find a match, a program that you post that they're interested in, they will reach out to you through the platform and vice versa. Then the French institutions, the French faculty will post the type of partnerships that they're seeking with US institutions and US faculty, and then you can search those on an ongoing basis as well and reach out to those French counterparts to develop those relationships. I know in your offices, you probably have some specific study abroad programs that you might be interested in developing, but I encourage you to promote this, publish this widely at your institution so faculty on campus knows that this is a resource that's available for them as well, and perhaps they have a research opportunity or research desire that they seek to collaborate with French faculty members. And there are a couple links there for the actual platform, and then a YouTube video, short one that they can use to that you can use to watch and learn about the program. At the bottom of this slide, and this is as condensed as possible for this enormous program that many of you probably know about. It's Erasmus Plus. I'm sure many of you know about the Erasmus Plus program, and the first thing to note about the Erasmus Plus program is the Plus, Erasmus Plus, is just the name for the program that lasts until 2021. It's the current funding scheme of the Erasmus programs that have been around for many years. It will be renewed in 2021 with new programming and new levels of funding. There have been information that's been published and providing about funding starting in 2021. It will be significantly increased funding level-wise, so that's the first thing to note about the Erasmus programs, suite of programs. The second thing is that contrary to popular belief, there is the ability for US institutions, faculty, and students to participate in the Erasmus Plus programs. And I provided the name of a few of those programs below: the Jean Monnet, the Erasmus Mundus, and the International Credit Mobility Program. That's one of several programs in this scheme of programs. And each one of those programs have their own on-ramp in terms of how US institutions can apply to participate in them and receive support. Jean Monnet, for example, there's the European Centers for Excellence. So a US institution applies directly to that program. Erasmus Mundus is a graduate level program usually that students apply to directly, and it's for dual and joint degrees that is done by collections of institutions around the world. So students apply to Erasmus Mundus directly. And the International Credit Mobility Program is a program that you can apply to in concert with one of your European institutional partners as a sub-grantee. And that can provide support through the International Credit Mobility Program for European students to receive support to study at your institution, and then for your students to receive support to study at the European institution. So there are different ways to apply to Erasmus Plus programs. It's a gigantic program, and to break it down, we can provide some additional information. My recommendation moving forward, a quick, simple step for you to learn more about it: speak with us, but then also speak with your representative, your institutional partner at a European institution, and they can tell you more about the Erasmus Plus programs as well. Some other things about institutional partnerships moving forward that you can consider is expand your exchanges, not just for students, through your student exchange agreements that might already be part of the institutional partnerships, but expand it to faculty, researchers, administrators, or staff. That's great to do with your institutional partnerships and very important to do, as I'm sure you need to diversify them so that they are stronger and not just dependent on perhaps two individuals who do research together, so they're broader and more durable. 2+2s, so seamless credit mobility agreements between institutions so students can travel back and forth. Dual and joint degrees, I know that those take a long time to set up, but those are something that are of ongoing interest, and like the Erasmus Mundus program that I mentioned, that is what that program is for, to support dual and joint degrees. Refresh and diversify your existing partnerships Again, sometimes they can be very fragile. You get one faculty member, as you know, that retires, and then the entire partnership can fall apart. So expand it, do different things with it, and speak to your institutional partners here about what they need, what their needs are, and maybe you can help to address them, to do things like host their faculty that study abroad programs at your institution. Learn from our advisors. They are very versed in what the institutions in their respective countries need, and funding support that can help to support their development, and incorporate partnerships into the overall recruitment strategy. Every world region in the Education USA network has its own approach, and I would say that's something that is very important to do in Europe, because of the number of institutional partnerships, is for you to bring that into the top line of what you're doing when you're doing student recruitment and engagement with our region. When your recruiters are on the road, are they also visiting your institutional partners? That's a quick and simple question to check to make sure that you're doing moving forward. Thank you for that, and at this point I'll pass it over to my colleague Gordana. Gordana.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's session. One of the things that we felt was important to mention throughout this webinar is what kind of government scholarships our students can utilize in order to support their study in the US. And unlike other countries or unlike other regions in the world, like Brazil or Saudi Arabia, where students have access to great amount of funding from the government, our scholarships are not as wide. However, our students have been known to use this as an additional resource. In fact, about 60% of the countries in our region have these local scholarships available that come either from their local government or from private foundations. All of our advising centers globally are asked to include these opportunities on their center profile page. In case there are some of you who may not have seen what the center profile page looks like, we've included a snapshot, and that's the current slide. As you can see, this is what Fulbright Prague offers in terms of their services. In the bottom left corner, you'll see the services, events available, as well as financial aid. And through the financial aid tab, you'll see the type of funding that they have. Besides the Fulbright funding, they have other scholarships as well. One of the most prominent one, for example, in Prague is the Bacala Foundation, which provides gap funding. And this is useful for you in case you have students who have not received a significant financial aid package, but they would still like to attend your institution. Please feel free to check out this resource and then share with prospective students what other local opportunities they have available. And always please make sure that you contact the advisors as well in case you need additional information regarding their local context. If we check out the next slide, you'll be able to see a snapshot of some countries that have generous scholarships available. So scholarships that would ultimately be able to cover the full tuition costs of a student attending your institution's program. So these are scholarships available for a full year, and they can be renewed. This is just a snapshot of what we have available. There are also other 21 countries, which you can find in the handout. We'll be able to send you the presentation after the webinar. So if you'd like to see a copy of it, please email us and you can download all of these handouts that we've included in the presentation. What's important for these scholarships for you to know is because they come from the government, they follow certain criteria. Some of them are only restricted to universities that are within the top 100 schools from the Shanghai ranking list. Others are from the top 500 schools of the Shanghai ranking list. And of course, they're limited to certain majors. They might have additional requirements, such as students being asked to come back to their home country so that they can fulfill the 2-year requirements. So all of these specifics are something that the advisors can help you with, and all of this is included in the handout as well. What we'd like to point out, what has been a successful recruiting strategy for some colleges or universities, is to go to the countries where they know that they can combine this funding that's available to students with their own funding in order to diversify their campus and recruit from countries they may not have had students from. Such a good example, for example, would be Slovenia. The 35,000 that you see here is available to both undergraduates and graduates. And over the past years, we've had certain universities who've returned to Slovenia because of the fact that this is additional funding that they can combine with their own, and in that case, open up the market and create a pipeline of Slovenian students coming to their campuses. With this, I'll pass it over to Katja. We'll talk about the cohort programming, and then we'll return with me in a little bit.
Thank you, Gordana. Next slide, please. So in terms of reaching students in the region, beginning I mentioned that we do have some cohort programs that are running in Europe and Eurasia. The most common one that you've probably heard of if you've worked with other regions is the Competitive College Club. This is mainly going to be working with high school students, but we do have a few countries where there is a track for university students who are also working with advisors in a similar program. The whole point of the Competitive College Club is that it's a competitive process to join the program. Students have to demonstrate that they have high academic achievement already, really strong English language skills, and they have to participate in a variety of activities that is usually about 18 months in length. When they're participating in these programs, they're doing more than just working on their applications to be successful for admissions. They're working on other aspects that will help them be successful once they actually get to campus. So they are doing things like book discussions and reading books that their American peers are reading in US schools and universities. They are participating in various activities like public speaking workshops, writing workshops. They learn about cultural adaptation and those kinds of things. So this is a very comprehensive program. It doesn't operate in all of our countries, but I wanted to mention it specifically just because it is a good thing to ask advisors if they are currently running a competitive college club. They're often looking for guest speakers. If you're in the country visiting or can do a webinar, they're looking for ways that they can diversify the types of institutions and programs that are being promoted to students at the local level. Next slide. I think you skipped a slide one back. Yes, okay, thanks. So again, a competitive college club is just one type of cohort program that is operating in our network and also in our network specifically in Europe and Eurasia. Again, I want you just to be sure to ask advisors when you're reaching out to them about the other kinds of cohort programs they're offering. The audience will be a little bit different and the length will be a little bit different, but all the advisors are looking for, again, ways to promote the diversity of US higher education with a variety of speakers, programs, and universities represented. So there's other ways that you can engage with the advisors even if they don't have a competitive college club. I will mention specifically opportunity funds. This is another cohort program that we have running. In many of our countries, specifically in Europe and Eurasia, the 10 countries that operate this opportunity funds, these students are mostly working within a competitive college club. So the way this differs from the broader competitive college club cohort is that these are full need students. They have already achieved a certain level of academic success, have strong English language skills, but they have full financial need. So the program helps them to cover some of the upfront costs associated with applying to a US institution, as well as those costs of going to the US institution if they're admitted with full funding. So you may have students approaching you, asking you questions who are from the competitive college club. These students will be anywhere from full need to full pay. We work with a diverse group of students there, but if they're from the opportunity funds cohort, they will specifically be a full need student. So they will be needing to acquire full financial support in order to qualify for the full funding available through this program. Again, it's not a scholarship. It won't pay any of the tuition and fees. It can pay for testing. If they need to take a standardized exam, it can pay for them to travel to the testing center if it's not in their hometown. But if they're admitted to a US institution and have full funding from the institution or from an external source like a government scholarship or from a private foundation, then the program can also provide funding for them to travel to campus to start studies. There's CVIS and visa fees and a modest settling in award. So that's an option for students who are going to be full need. So if you're working with those students, be sure to, again, ask us about which countries they're operating, and we can help you there. Each year, the cycle is going to be slightly different. Some of the countries where the Opportunity Funds is operating, they have 5 students, 3 students, and some have as many as 30 or 40 students. So on any given year, we'll have between 100 and 120 students in Europe and Eurasia who are part of these Opportunity Fund cohorts. And with that, I will pass it on.
And we talked about a couple of opportunities that our students have access to. When they apply to US universities, they combine multiple resources. And the next slide will talk about the financial assistance that they look at. So besides combining their own private funding, maybe government scholarships, they're also interested in seeing what kind of funding does your institution, if you provide any. What kind of funding do you have? The easiest way to market those opportunities is if you utilize our EducationUSA website or a portal where you can create your own login and publicize your financial aid opportunities. These vary from scholarships, in-state tuition benefits, any type of waivers that student can access, and we market these globally. What we've been very good at recently is utilizing oral social media for this purpose, such as our Instagram account, and advisors pick it up easily and have these scholarships alerts available every week. So really, if you put your financial opportunities here, it's easy accessible by all of our students globally, as well as our own students in Europe and Eurasia. Would also like to highlight that if you have financial aid opportunities available to a particular country, you can target that country specifically, and the advisor and the students will be able to see that this is something that they can tap into and use this resource for their own students as well. When we look at the next slide, it shares some details on how we utilize alumni in our outreach efforts and how we rely on them to help us promote US higher education. And one of the examples that we've shared here are US educated alumni, such as current students. They don't necessarily have to visit our advising centers. Oftentimes they work as virtual interns, and they even run entire cohorts on their own. So they're super helpful for the advisors, either graduate advising, they review essays. It's just an additional support that we use through our advising program. Of course, some of our countries in Southern Europe and in Eurasia have Peace Corps volunteers. They are crucial for our programming, especially because of the fact that they're based in remote cities. So they provide more outreach for us and more diverse recruiting that we'll be able to do on our own. Sometimes we have US Embassy staff participating in our events. As you can see in the pictures, even ambassadors participate at some of the fairs that we organize, and those bring a lot of media attention, as well as Fulbright students who are oftentimes trained by the REACs to provide advising to potential students. So if you have any contacts that you think we are able to work with or are within our regions, please let us know. Our region also has a lot of United States government alumni. The FLEX program is available in 16 countries. It expanded to 4 more this year, and it has created a pipeline of new high school students who visit our advising centers. You'll be able to meet some of these alumni at some of your visits in our region, and we'll be happy to also organize events with them because oftentimes they serve as a student ambassador. We keep in touch with our EducationUSA advisors, but also with parents of prospective students. This is a new target audience we are utilizing in our programs because they are actually the best advocates, since they can speak with other parents and address any concerns that the parents might have. The next slide shows a couple of examples on how we've utilized alumni. So as I said, if you have any that you think would be excellent ambassadors, please let us know and we'll be happy to incorporate them in our social media strategies. Some advisors have created YouTube channels where they share their alumni stories. Other advisors work on quarterly newsletters, and they have testimonials or students who are back in their home country and they use them for their outreach efforts. And then of course for International Education Week, we make sure to have students who are currently in the US sharing their experiences of what it is that they like there and how beneficial the EducationUSA Advising Center was in helping them go to the US. The next slide provides the examples of what we do when we organize alumni fairs. And this is an excellent opportunity for those of you who've never recruited in our region, who may not have the budget or the time to travel and visit our advising centers. Please make sure that if you have alumni that you connect them to the advising centers, because we organize alumni fairs which really help us show the examples of the diversity of U.S. higher education from short-term programs, community colleges, four-year programs, and this is a great opportunity for peer-to-peer advising. And a lot of these alumni also serve as mentors in a couple of countries that Katya spoke about, and they really help us extend our reach as well. Throughout the Alumni Affairs, it's not just the fair, we often have presentation, we have alumni presentation, alumni panels, and other program opportunities that really capitalize on having these alumni fairs available in Europe and Eurasia. In case you're wondering where we hold these events, the next slide will provide a list of the countries where the alumni fairs are held. Okay, so as you can see, we have a couple of countries where the alumni fairs are. These are free of charge. All you have to do is send us your promotional materials so that we can display them at our tables. As you can see, this is a parent that was at one of our fairs, and they have become a really successful recruitment tool for us because in a couple of our countries, it is the parents who are decision-making factors, and it really helps when they have another parent to talk to. In case you're wondering what are the dates for any of these countries, you can email the REAC for the respective country, and we will share more details about that with you. The last and final section we'll talk about of our presentation. We'll talk about opportunities on how you can stay connected and how we can keep you updated on what's going on in Europe and Eurasia. Some of you may have already participated in our EducationUSA fairs, which are listed on this slide. As you can see, we have 4 EducationUSA fairs across Europe. One of them is about to take place next week. That's the Southeastern Europe tour, which goes through 8 countries. The REACs pay attention to what it is that the reps need. So oftentimes we evaluate the representatives in order to ask them whether there are any other new potential markets where they would like to recruit students from. And that was the reason why we added 2 new stops for the LLM fair this fall. Turkey and the United Kingdom have been added in the schedule. But as you can see, a lot of our countries are represented in our fairs. If you have the possibility to come recruit, we'll be happy to host you. But even if you're not able to travel, as we said, we have opportunities to find ways to keep you engaged within our region. An upcoming event that's coming up in September, as the next slide indicates, is our European Association for International Education Conference. This is, in a way, the biggest international education conference in Europe. It's like the European NAFSA, where we have 90 countries participate, and all of the REACs are at EAIE. We have representatives from ECA, so our program officer will be there, as well as EducationUSA advisors. What's unique about EAIE is that we also organize a US pavilion for US universities or state consortia who would like to take part at EAIE, either as a full-time or a part-time participant. If you're interested in the fees and the dates, this is the link that we have here. What this conference has helped a lot of the universities with is their new partnership agreements, and some of them have been able to also generate new revenue from these, but also we've been able to assist them in increasing their visibility at EAIE, because it's not just a conference where European institutions attend. We have institutions from all over the world. So if you're interested in establishing partnerships, please make sure you check out this event. And the final slide that I'm going to cover shows what are some of the ways that we can keep you regularly informed about what's going on in Europe and Eurasia. We have a monthly newsletter. That's the link that you can use to opt in to receive our updates. Here, what's most unique about it is that we share any engagement opportunities that we have within our region. Oftentimes, the advisors are looking for speakers, either for smaller programs such as webinars, or for high-level programs such as capacity building workshops. And we put the announcements here and ask if anyone is able to come to our region and visit us. And the second resource is our list of local events. This is for those of you who may be in the region and you want to do a recruitment event, but you don't know what it is that you can join. The list includes all of our fairs and conferences, but also our higher education fairs across Europe and Eurasia. Oftentimes, it's free of charge for you to attend these events. All you have to do is coordinate with the advisors in time, and they will be happy to host you. Please make sure that you also check out the center pages for the details, such as the dates, or for any other questions that you might have that the advisors can help out with. And with this, I will pass it on to Matt, who will wrap up with the final part of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Gordana, and Katya and Peter as well. To sort of bring this part of the presentation to a close, I just wanted to reiterate what I think you've heard from our REACT so far, which is take the opportunity to connect with Education USA advising centers in the country of interest, and also the REACTs. On our website, you'll find on educationusa.state.gov an opportunity to search for our centers with their contact information, and so you can reach out to them and to our REACTs as well. They are great initial points of contact for starting to explore recruitment opportunities in countries you've pinpointed as places you want to recruit. Also, please share your services, your expertise with our network to reach more students, to support them both in person at Education USA fairs and events, and virtually as well through the different webinars that individual advising centers, for example, offer on topics of interest, broad topics of interest to students going through this process of gaining admission to U.S. institutions. We host several big events here in Washington. The Education USA Forum every summer has 400 to 500 U.S. institutions participating, all of our REACTs, approximately 50 to 60 advisors who come in to Washington to work with the higher ed community to develop recruitment strategies for each world region. And we do regional forums as well out in all the world regions where we operate, and they happen every 3 years in each region, and those are great opportunities to go in depth on the region that you're interested in recruiting in. Please send your recruitment materials. They are still very useful in many parts of the world to get your institutional information out, make students aware of your campus and the opportunities you offer those students. Again, engage alumni. We mentioned that in depth, but those alumni are a key and still relatively untapped resource for institutions. Take advantage of those folks to help amplify your message and your recruitment efforts. Our social media channels like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, those type of social media platforms are great ways to actually engage with us and with our network and with students. So avail yourselves of that opportunity as well. The fairs that are held throughout the world are fair circuits are increasingly popular among the higher ed community, and offer you an opportunity to meet with hundreds, if not thousands, of students when you visit a country. They're a great opportunity for you. And be sure to go ahead and create a profile on our website and submit content as was mentioned. And I might also want to add that the fairs too are not only in person, but we have virtual fairs like the College Week Live and others as well, where you have an opportunity to connect virtually to students. Next slide, please. Some of our big events coming up, I sort of mentioned them a bit earlier, but we have the forum in the summer of 2019. Back, please. Back. Oh, no, okay, that's good. We have a Education USA Advisor Training Institute happening this summer. The deadline for the applying to host advisors on your campus for the Training Institute for the summer, the deadline's coming up in a few days on April 1st, but there'll be another opportunity later in the fall, probably in September, and we'll be putting out a request for proposals. So look into that as an opportunity for you and other institutions to collaborate on hosting our advisors. We have the actually the NEA forum, the MENA forum, is happening as we speak in Morocco, and we have one coming up in the EAP region, East Asia Pacific, in the fall of 2019, and I believe the dates will be announced very soon on that. Next slide, please. All right. So we have a number of questions that have come in from the audience. And what we'll do here is I will sort of take them one by one, and we'll do our best to answer those questions along with the rest of the panel here from EUR. The first question, are there any platforms like the FACTS program for Americans and other countries? Maybe Peter have any of my other colleagues heard of a similar platform available for other countries as well?
Thanks, Matt. I have not heard of a similar program in any of my countries. And usually when doing this sort of thing, it's more face-to-face convening that is done for institutional partnership development. And by that, I mean bringing delegation representatives from US institutions to a program here in Europe so that they can meet representatives from European institutions in a respective country. So traditionally, that's how it has been done. More the face-to-face type of engagement. So this platform that was, again, very recently launched in France is a great innovative and a model that hopefully will be replicated in other countries moving forward. We always keep our ears to the ground to try to hear of other resources like this, and as they come up, we do publish them and promote them. And I will put a shameless plug into our newsletter for our regional newsletter. The link was in this presentation that you can access as well afterwards, where we would publish if additional resources like this become available. So that's the one that I have heard about so far.
Great, thank you, Peter. Another question comes in. Are community colleges gaining recognition among European students and parents? And are the 2+2 pathways transferable to an EU bachelor's degree? Gordana, is that something you would like to address?
Sure. We've been tracking very closely what's happening with our colleges and where we have interest that's picked up lately. I'd just like to name a few countries that might be of interest to the universities joining our webinar. So the countries with the highest increases are Moldova, Sweden, Albania, Ukraine, Poland, Montenegro, Czech Republic, and Russia. And some of these countries can even use loans that the students can community college. We haven't heard any concerns about the community college degree not being transferable or the 2+2. I've had a lot of advisors, for example, in Turkey that have been very successful, and we're using their success stories to promote community colleges more throughout Turkey. So I would say that there are no concerns as of yet.
All right, another question. Thank you very much, Gordana. Another question came in. How can U.S. faculty help in the recruiting process for PhD applicants from the Eurasia region? Katja.
When we talk about PhD students, and there's definitely a specific type of students that we're working with, and we are encouraging them to establish some sort of connection with faculty on campus as part of the application process. We also encourage them to go to international conferences and present on their work, where they can also meet with faculty in person. But if you have any faculty who are coming to the region, either on a Fulbright grant to do some research or university-based funding to do some research, we can get them involved with our advising centers. They would be welcome to do a presentation on their research and how it relates to the region, or how it relates to students coming to assist them with that research on campus. So that would be the main way we would suggest that you engage specifically PhD students, is to have the faculty look for them at these conferences, or if they're traveling to the region, have them reach out to us and we can help facilitate that.
Great, thank you. Another question comes in. How do you find partnership, scholarship, and cohort opportunities for a specific country in the region? Either of you could take that.
Hi, Gordana.
Oh, well, as we've said throughout the presentation, please feel free to check out the handout that we prepared for the scholarship opportunities. A lot of the advising centers organize capacity building workshops, and those will be listed on their events center page. So if you're interested in a particular country, you can see what it is that they have planned, but also feel free to email the advisor. A lot of the Fulbright commissions are involved in partnership development, and that's a good starting point. But even countries that do not have a Fulbright commission Commission and are starting to increase their interest in partnerships and organizing this capacity building workshops thanks to the study abroad grant. So we will have all of those listed under the center profile page.
Great, thank you. There was another question that came in regarding law school programs, such as the LLMs for holder of a JD or its equivalent, and or Master of Jurisprudence for non-law graduates. Is this, could you talk a little bit, perhaps it's a very specific question, but a little bit about the interest that our students from Europe and Eurasia have in LLM programs in the United States? Is that growing?
Well, for us, most of the students who are doing law programs looking for graduate degrees in the States are getting their law degree at the bachelor level. So they are looking for masters, usually LLMs, in the U.S. So I can speak specifically about Ukraine. This is one country in particular where there's a really strong interest in LLM programs. We have students interested in this program every year. And the one private foundation scholarship that is available to students, students can use some of these funds to help do cost share for that program, for our LLM program in the States. But I can pass it on to Gordana, who could talk specifically about the tour that some of our advisors in Western Europe and Central Europe are doing specifically on the LLM programs.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, so the LLM tour takes place in November. It goes through 7 countries this fall, and what's been very beneficial about it is throughout the tour, the reps who participate also have the chance to meet with law faculty who also do the briefings. So they will be able to tell you about any potential that they see in either developing partnerships or recruiting from potential law firms. The LLM fairs usually have between 50 to 100 to maybe even 200 participants who come in. We tend to invite both law students, but also practitioners who come from law agencies who will be able to sponsor an LLM program. So if you're interested in any of these stops, 7 stops in particular, please feel to email the REAC and we'll give you more details about the type of universities that attend the tour and also the type of questions that we usually get from each stop.
Great, thank you. There was another question that came in. Our institution is interested in hosting EducationUSA advisors on our campus. What are the options available? And that's a great question, and there are a number of opportunities. I had mentioned that related to the EducationUSA Training Institute, but EducationUSA on an annual basis brings advisors and reacts in for opportunities to participate in NAFSA, ACRO, NAGAP, International ACAC, all the major associations, others as well. CCID, all of these type of conferences we have people going to. And there are opportunities for EducationUSA advisors to visit host institutions in the United States that would like to host them before or after a conference. We help coordinate that. That's funded by the host institutions themselves, but it provides a great opportunity for our advisors to get to know your campus and to get a broader perspective on your type of institution and the sort of higher education landscape. It's a great professional development opportunity for our advisors. It's also a great opportunity for the schools themselves to showcase your services to your students and your academic offerings. So that is another wonderful opportunity for the institutions. Let's see here. We're getting to the 2 o'clock hour. Last quick question. Is the 2+2 community college model transferable to an EU bachelor's degree? We know that. Either of you.
I'm not quite sure, actually. Our experience with the 2+2 model is that students would continue their 4-year degree in the States. There are some countries where the 2-year associate's degree is considered enough for various local employment opportunities, but for the most part, the students from our region who are looking to do that are staying for the 4-year degree in the States. I I'm not aware of any of our students that advisors have worked with who have come back and finished a 3-year EU bachelor program after doing 2 years at a community college. I don't know, Gordon, if you have any other ideas on that.
Yeah, usually in my case, the students who do the 2-year degree were able to find employment opportunities. I haven't heard about cases where they continue to transfer to 4-year degree and have difficulties, but I guess this would be much more specific to the country itself. So we'll have to consult with the advisors to get more input on the specific context.
Great, thank you. I think we have time to squeeze in the last question that came in, asking if there's like a demand and interest for opportunities in the United States for students from our region to engage in environmental science, climate change study, and biology. Is there a demand in what you're seeing in the region for studying in those particular fields in the United States?
I think it depends on the country. I mean, the students we work with are very interested in STEM fields broadly. And so within that, I'm sure there is a good number of them who are interested in more specific fields related to environmental science and that sort of thing. Again, if you look at some of the universities or some of the countries that have funding and some of the private foundations, some of these are available to students specifically looking at environmental studies. So Ukraine's program for graduate studies would allow them to study environmental studies in the US. Another thing could be just talk to the advisors. It depends on the development priorities of each country. And so if there are particular priorities in the country specifically along these lines for environmental sciences, then this would be a really good way for you to also engage with the advisors to promote your programs in the States. It is a relatively unknown field of study, I have to say. In a lot of the countries I cover, at least, there is no such thing as a degree in environmental studies for most of them. And so this is a very new field that many of these countries need, but it's not available locally. So it could be a good opportunity for you to engage specifically with the region on that.
And in my case, there are countries where they have a lot of environmental problems. So the government has, or the Fulbright Commission has been able to provide scholarships for environmental policy. So this has been a field that graduate students have been looking into recently.
Great. Thank you both for that. So I'd like to wrap up just by thanking you all for attending this webinar. I hope it was helpful. We'll publish the recording on our Education USA YouTube page. Our next webinar will be hosted on April 30th at 1 p.m. We'll be focusing on best practices for recruiting students from Latin America. So that's all for now. Thank you, and we'll see you again soon.